So some of you might know that I love to read, and I love to read to kids. And when my kids were little, I read to them all the time. And this was a book that they absolutely adored. And mom did too, so we read it a lot. And so I wanted to share with everybody this story. And at this time in my life, when I'm doing ULA, this is very inspirational to me because of the message that it gives. And it's the right time of year because it's called The Dancing Witch. And I'm going to read it to you. So Ellen Shire is the author. She wrote this in 1965. This is an old library book. And I don't believe anybody did anything with it afterwards. She drew the pictures as well. And so it's just nice black and white shots and text. So, in a city crowded with buildings and bursting with noise, a quiet little lady named Una lived alone in a skyscraper. She was a rather pear-shaped little lady with a smile that seemed to hide a mischievous secret. She shared her apartment with Herman, her cat, and Vera, her canary. They were never lonely. Often Vera gave little concerts, and Herman would flick his ears in time to the music while Una rocked back and forth in a creaky chair. No one would ever believe that Una was unhappy. Poor Una. In spite of Herman and Vera and her cozy apartment, she was miserable. What could she do? She didn't want to be a secretary or a nurse or a teacher or a dressmaker or any of the other things that most ladies want to be. Ever since she was a little girl in pigtails with her 2 front teeth missing, deep down in her heart, Una wanted to be a witch. Yes, you heard that correctly. Every night, wrapped in her fluffy quilt, she dreamed of dark forests with twisted trees and spidery branches in the moonlight. And above the treetops, perched on an old broom, she saw herself gliding across the inky sky. Sometimes she remembered the dream in the morning, and sometimes she would jump out of bed and clean her apartment just so she could hold her broom. One evening when dinner was over, Una decided to make her dream come to life. With a long piece of clothesline, she climbed out on her fire escape, do not try this at home, and tied one end to the railing. The other end she tied to her broomstick and pulled the knots very tight. Lifting her skirt, she stepped carefully, very carefully, over the railing. She didn't dare look down at the tiny people in the streets below because that made her dizzy. She looked only upwards at the darkening sky. Wrapping her legs around her broomstick, she took a deep breath and let go into the air. Whee! Out to the end of the rope and then back and forth she swung just like a real witch. The apartment, the people below, even Herman and Vera, all were forgotten. A witch can't be bothered with silly things like that. The only sound she heard as she swooped by her building was the wind in her ears. It seemed to say, "Swish, swish, Una's a witch." "Hello, Herman," she hollered as she passed by her window. "Hi, Vera," she shouted on her way back. But even in a big city, there isn't much work for witches. Every day without fail, she searched through the newspapers in the hope of finding somebody who would hire one. But most people wanted cooks or maids or butlers or window washers. No one needed witches except on Halloween. What's the good of that, thought Una. A witch can get rusty if she can't practice. One day, when Una was feeling particularly glum, an announcement appeared on the front page of the newspaper, which needed for new Hansel and Gretel ballet. Una nearly fell off her chair. What wonderful news for a hopeful witch! There was to be an audition in 2 weeks where dancers would have a chance to try out for the part. Why, this was even better than being a regular witch. Imagine being a dancing witch and performing in a grand theater. Una began daydreaming, picturing herself as a famous witch dancer, curtsying to a cheering audience and being showered with flowers. But the audition was just 2 weeks away, and Una hadn't danced since those afternoons in ballet class so long ago when she was a first grader. How could she ever learn the steps in time? The next morning, she bought a leotard and a pair of ballet slippers and skipped off down the street for her first dancing lesson in many years. When she arrived at the school, Una went to the beginner's class taught by her old teacher, Madame Olga. "Good morning, class," said Madame Olga, and then she smiled. "Well, hello, Una. Welcome to class. It's so nice to have you back." And then she turned to the other students. "First position, please." And the lesson began. The pianist played waltzes and marzacas and polkas, but oh, how difficult the exercises seemed to Una. Her bones creaked and her muscles ached. "Madame Olga," she panted, "somehow it seemed much easier before." Madame Olga just smiled. "It takes long years of hard work to become a dancer, and you're out of practice. It's not as easy as it looks, you know." "I don't want to be a ballet dancer anyway," thought Una to herself. "I want to be a witch." The audition day came much too quickly. Una was too nervous to eat. As she ran to the theater, her feet seemed to fly under her and her heart thumped loud and fast. When she reached the theater, she stopped, stone still. Her excited smile turned upside down. At the stage door were hundreds of other girls who wanted to audition for the part. Bow-legged girls and lumpy girls and skinny girls and freckly girls, girls with curls, girls with ponytails. Every girl in the whole world seemed to be there. What chance did she have now? "Oh, well," she sighed, "I'm not going to give up without a try." And she followed the other girls through the stage door. A fat, bald little man who was the director beckoned the nervous girls onto the empty stage and told them to line up in front of him as he puffed a big cigar. How different the theater looked without the audience, lights, and scenery. An empty pail and a few brooms were all that were lying about on the stage. "Good afternoon," said the director in a big voice. "I would like to see you dance for me one at a time." And he nodded to the pianist and, pointing to a girl standing nearby, said, "You're first." And the audition started. So there's the director and the pianist, all the girls, and then the stage. One at a time, each girl nervously came out to perform. Some wore simple practice clothes and did fancy steps, high leaps, upside down balances, kicks, and handstands. There's the gamut of dancers. Others wore fancy costumes made of lace and ruffles and sparkles, but did simple steps. The audition went on and on. One girl after another tried and failed. But there were still many girls left, and Una had a long time to wait before her turn, and she began to feel cold and stiff. "I know what I better do," she said to herself. "I'll find a dark corner where I won't get in anyone's way, and I'll practice my steps." At the back of the stage, where no one could see her, Una practiced jumping, whirling, kicking, and even standing on her hands. Getting all warmed up, right? She worked so hard. She finally had to sit down and rest. But all her practicing made her so tired she soon fell asleep. When she awoke, the theater was empty. "Oh no," she cried, "the audition is over." The only people left were a few cleaning women busily mopping the empty stage. And soon they too went home. Now Una was all alone in the dark theater, and she began to cry. "I have missed my only chance to be a witch," she sobbed. And as she dragged herself toward the door, she noticed an old broom leaning against the wall. "I must see what it's like to be a performing witch," she thought, and before you could snap your fingers, Una was running and leaping about the stage. She forgot the audition, the tears and the disappointments, the shadowy stage, the ladders and chairs became a magnificent forest, and Una, the queen of witches. In and out she weaved, faster and faster. "Stop!" yelled a deep voice from the back of the theater. Una nearly dropped her broom. She peeped over her shoulder, and to her great amazement, whom should she see running towards her but the director of the ballet. "You're terrific," he shouted. "Bravo, bravo. You're going to be our witch." No more dreaming for Una. The next day she went out for her first rehearsal and a new life. She learned just how it had to be done before ballet could be presented to the public. There was scenery to paint, sets to build, costumes to fit, and for the dancers, new steps to learn. Every day from morning to night, Una practiced and sweated, but she didn't mind going over and over her part. She was thrilled that she worked harder than anyone else. At last her night arrived, the opening of the Hansel and Gretel ballet. Una went to the theater early to put on her makeup. Herman and Vera went along with her. And when she reached her dressing room, Una found a surprise awaiting her. The other dancers had sent her flowers of every shape and color. As Una powdered her face, Vera chirped a special good luck melody. Suddenly there was a knock at the door, and a voice cried, "You're on, Miss Una." See how happy she is? And there's the kitty and the bird. She rushed to the stage. On the other side of the curtain, the audience hushed, and the theater lights dimmed. The conductor raised his baton, music filled the theater, and the curtain went up. How strange it felt to be all alone on the stage in front of so many people. The music is so loud, thought Una, and the lights are so hot. But she soon forgot all about them. The only thing that mattered now was that she, Una, was at last a dancing witch, casting strange spells to music and stirring evil potions in a steaming hot pot. When the curtain fell, the audience roared, "Bravo, bravo, Una!" And Una bowed so many times she made herself dizzy. She was good. After the first big night, the ballet was performed over and over, and Una became a star witch. Photographers came to snap her, artists came to sketch her, and admirers sent so many flowers that her dressing room was called Una's garden. She even tested brooms for a big broom company. Nobody knew brooms as well as Una, and when Una said, "This is my favorite broom," everybody bought it. Eventually, she traveled and performed all over the world, from Paris to Turkey. Her clothes became the fashion, and her simple red dress and hat were copied in chic salons everywhere. Una's name was familiar in every country. But all this fame, glamour, and wealth did not spoil Una. She loved being a dancing witch, living a comfortable life. But do you know what Una liked best of all? When she came home late at night, after the ballet, she loved to climb onto her fire escape, tie her old broom around the railing, and swing out into the air. And there, if you looked out your window, you might catch a glimpse of her swinging back and forth and back and forth and back and forth. And that is the end. I hope you like the Una story as much as I do. There's a lot in that story, and I'm going to talk about that in just a little bit.